Well, good evening. Welcome to our March 1st Wednesdays. Much better weather than we had for February, that's for sure. We hope this continues. I'm Jeff Hornsby. I'm the director of the Regnier Institute and chair of the Entrepreneurship and Management departments here in the Bloch School. So welcome to First Wednesdays. We have a great program for you tonight. I want to welcome our faculty. Do we have any mentors here tonight? I don't know if I see any mentors tonight. We have a whole team of mentors that mentor both our students and our ventures going through our various programs. So Bryan Boots is going to give a commercial for our eScholars program and our other events. But I encourage you, if you do have a startup idea, to connect with us, and we can get you some help relating to mentorship, our Entrepreneurs in Residence program we have upstairs, and the other programs that we put on. I'm going to turn it over to Bryan Boots, who will make a few announcements and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Jeff. So we've got a few announcements before we turn it over to our speaker for this evening. The first one I want to make is it's actually an event that our speaker himself participated in. It's called the Regnier Venture Creation Challenge. And it is essentially UMKC's student startup pitch competition. We have $70,000 in prizes. This year's competition will take place on May 1st. So the idea with this competition is that if you have an idea for a business that you want to start, that's all you need. You don't need to have started the business yet. You don't need to even necessarily have a prototype to compete in the competition. Come with your idea, and we'll help you figure out the next steps from that. And the prize money is intended to help you launch your business. So use that money for prototyping, for legal expenses, any of those things that you might need to get a business off the ground. So a few things to remember. The actual competition is May 1st, but the deadline to apply is April 1st. You need to register, and then there's a few other things that you'll see in there when you go to the website. The website, if you go to bloch.umkc.edu/RVCC, as in Regnier Venture Creation Challenge, RVCC 2020, you can find a lot more information about the competition. You can find the link to apply. One other thing with that, the competition is open to and encouraged participation from students of every single discipline. So you don't have to be a business student. You don't have to have ever even taken a business class to participate in the competition. One other announcement I want to make is also related to our speaker. It's our Entrepreneurship Scholars or eScholars program. eScholars is UMKC's and the Regnier Institute's Student Entrepreneurship Accelerator program. So again, if you have an idea for a business that you want to start and you want some structured support to help you do so in the form of workshops, mentorship, and lots of other resources, eScholars is the best place in Kansas City for you to do that. So the thing for that is probably the easiest way to find it is just Google UMKC eScholars. But you can also go to tinyurl.com/ES Fall 2020. The next cohort that we bring in will be in fall of 2020. You can also reach out to Alex Matlack, who some of you might know if you've taken her classes, and she can give you some more information, or I can give you more information. So with that, I would like to introduce our guest speaker now. Bryan Shannon is, I kind of gave a little preview, but Bryan is a graduate of our eScholars program. He also went through the Regnier Venture Creation Challenge himself. So back it up farther. Bryan studied communications here at UMKC. He graduated, went out, and started his career in sales. I don't think this is an incorrect characterization to say that you never, at that time, you had no plans to start your own business. You just knew you wanted to be in business. So he got out into the working world and gained some experience and realized maybe he does want to start a business. So Bryan came back after graduating with his BA. He came back to UMKC, joined our eScholars program in 2016, and he came in with an idea, which I'll let him share more about because he can describe it a lot better. But he came in with an idea and fleshed that idea out, launched it, grew it, and there's a lot of pain in there, a lot of challenges and difficulties. But about a year ago, he sold the business to an Overland Park financial technology firm, and so now he's in the process of figuring out what does all of that mean to be acquired as a business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, let you fill in the details and share your story of starting and growing this business.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? We good? Perfect. Any aspiring entrepreneurs, business owners in the room at all? Okay, good. In the right room. After the introduction Bryan gave me, I'm not even sure if I need to go anymore. I mean, he packaged my story up in such a way that we can all pack up and go home, right? But as Bryan mentioned, I am the founder and former CEO of a company called TicketRX. And my story started a while ago. First and foremost, traffic tickets are awful. I don't know if anyone is aware of that at all or has experienced that in their life in any capacity. But traffic tickets are awful. They ruin everyone's day, right? I know from firsthand experience. When I was in your seat at UMKC, right around the 2006 time frame, I'm pretty sure I set the record for the most traffic tickets ever received by one individual. I got 51 tickets in a 12-month period of time. Yep. So typically when I share that story, one of the first questions I receive is, Bryan, how in the heck does someone get that many tickets? You have to try really hard to get 51 tickets, right? I say the answer is actually pretty simple. I had a fast car and a lead foot. I really only knew two speeds, faster and faster, right? I was literally on a first-name basis with campus security. And I remember leaving, because I was in the dorms in Cherry, and I remember leaving my dorm and flying down the street, and an officer would pull me over and say, Bryan, what the hell, man? Like, we just had this conversation 2 days ago. And it went from just receiving one ticket to 5 at a time. And I was getting tickets for you failed to come to a complete pause at a stop sign while not wearing your seatbelt and driving too close to the lane. Their goal, their thought was, if we do this enough and we give him enough citations, maybe this will slow this guy down, right? And in all actuality, I had a very close friend and mentor at that time who was an attorney in Kansas City. And I don't know if that helped or hindered me in the long run, because I would call him and I would say, hey, Donald, I got 5 more tickets this week, man. And he would give me some choice words, right? But then he would say, meet me down at the courthouse. And from that point, I would go in, talk to him. He'd give me some life lessons, about how I need to slow down and, you're going to ruin your chances of doing X, Y, and Z. But he was literally like a get-out-of-jail-free card, for me in that capacity. And so I spent a lot of time with Donald, right, sitting in the court waiting on my citations to be dismissed and removed. I started to observe individuals from all walks of life filing in and filing out of the courtrooms. You would see mothers with their children, people taking their lunch break to come in and, pay the fine for their seatbelt violation. You would see attorneys that would wheel file cabinets of paperwork into the courtroom. And I remember thinking there surely has to be a better way than this, right? And that's really what spun out the idea for the initial concept of TicketRX. At that point, we were just a website, and it was an assumption that I had that, we can create this website, and anybody who gets tickets, we're going to pair them with an attorney, and things are going to be great. Everybody's going to be able to have a Donald in their pocket, was my thought. And so I was getting ready to graduate in 2007, and I had the opportunity to take Professor Mark Perry's boot camp. And so we were sitting in class, and we were assigned a group, and, this is my senior year. I was like, I just need a grade to get out of here, and, this is going to be great. And so the team was coming up with different ideas. We should pitch this idea, or we should pitch that idea. I was like, guys, I really need this grade, and I have a couple ideas that we can choose from. TicketRX actually wasn't my first idea. I was a serial idea guy at that time, right? Like most entrepreneurs are. But pitched the concept to the group and said, hey, we can do this. They said, all right, let's do it. And so, interestingly enough, we pitched that idea in the boot camp and took second place. And that trophy still sits on my desk to this very day. My kids probably colored all over it and, use it to, fight their action figures with, but it's still there. And I just remember the excitement of, I had this idea and, we pitched it in this competition and things are great. Second place, on one of the major reasons were because my financials were complete trash. Right? I didn't have any concept of developing financials or forecasts or what we're going to do or any of that. I stood up in the front of the room and they said, your first year, what do you plan on doing in revenue? Easy, $9 million, right? And so I received a bunch of blank stares from the audience. I was like, well, I guess I should have went a little bit higher, right? But it was just that being naive and very ambitious at that time. So in 2007, I graduated. And like most entrepreneurs in that capacity, you graduate college and then you got to figure out how to make money, right? And so I took a stint in a business with a friend who was in the financial services industry at that time, which by far, 2007 was the worst time to start a financial services business in any capacity, right? And we had a pretty decent sized failure in that. We licked our wounds, until about 2011, which is when I got married and had my daughter, who's listening over here. As a true entrepreneur, I'm testing an assumption out right now by making my kids sit here and listen to me because they won't listen to me at home. So they have no choice now, right? 2011, I had to get a job because I got married and had a child. And so I went to work for some major corporations here and progressively climbed the ladder in leadership in different aspects with major companies here in Kansas City. And I was sitting in my office in 2015 when I was getting ready to start another business, right? I had this idea for this different company, and I needed a business plan. And I was like, God, where do I start? And I remember pulling out my thumb drive and opening up the business plan for TicketRX, and I actually almost deleted it because I was like, there's no way I'm going to do anything with this. This was an idea that I had back when I was in college. I can just use this template for my next business. And the only thing that kept me from making that decision was the fact that I scrolled to the very bottom of that plan and saw that it was 47 pages. I was like, what did I write 47 pages about as a senior in college? And so I started to read through the plan, and I made a decision at that moment that I would at least take it as far as I can possibly take it before I started my next business. My sole goal at that time was to crash and burn the idea so I can confidently move into the next business venture knowing that I gave it its fair shot. And so I didn't know what to do, where to go, who to talk to. I just had this idea and this decision that was made. And I was talking to a fraternity brother of mine who mentioned the e-Scholars program. And he said, have you ever heard of it? I said, nope, never heard of it. Tell me about it. He's like, well, here's what it does. They pair you with mentors. They help you flesh out your idea. You just have to have a business plan. I was like, I have 47 pages of that, right? We can check that off the list. And that's when I first got connected with Bryan and the e-Scholars team here. And I came into the program with just an idea. It was literally an idea that I had written on the back of a napkin. And there were all these amazing things going on in this program. There were individuals from all walks of life with businesses, and I'm sitting in the back of the class as a guy with this idea on a napkin, and there are people who are here actually making money. And I was like, I'm screwed, right? I am way over my head at this point. And I remember seeing the Venture Creation Challenge coming up. And by the way, that has gotten pretty good because it wasn't 70,000 when I went through it, let me tell you that. But I remember seeing that, and saying to myself, that'd be pretty cool to enter and just see what happens. But then I started to look at all of these businesses and all of these people who I thought were so much further ahead than me. I said, you know what, maybe timing's not right. And I went home and talked to my wife, and I remember her saying a set of words that really carried me through the entire process in some form or fashion, which was, what do you have to lose? Like, you have nothing to lose. What do you have to lose? By entering. They don't have to choose you. You just enter, right? I was like, yeah, you're right. Entered the program, advanced to the semifinals. I was like, oh, this is great. I got here. This is an idea I had, right? But it was validation. It gave me the confidence to actively start working on the idea a little bit more. So that program ended, and I remember asking the leaders of the eScholars program, what's the next step? Where do people typically go from here? And then that's when I got paired with some of the other ancillary programs in Kansas City. The next step for me was Digital Sandbox. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, well, it's kind of same format. You go in, you pitch your business. If they like you, they'll give you $25,000. It's not that simple, right? But I'm oversimplifying the story for the sake of time. And so I said, well, that's pretty cool. I like getting in front of crowds and running my mouth, so I'll go and run my mouth and see if they'll give me a check for $25,000 to actually build this business. Lo and behold, they did, right? I was like, wow, I'm on to something here, right? We used that to really flesh out the first version of the MVP, the minimum viable product. And it was in those moments where some key decisions had to be made, which I really want to make sure that I drive home today. So my company initially started as a business-to-consumer platform. The thought was I would create a product that allowed everyone who ever received a traffic violation in any form or fashion to pull out their phone, snap a picture of that ticket, hit send, and be connected with an attorney. And I thought it was a phenomenal idea, right? And some other people thought it was a pretty decent idea as well. But, I had an epiphany while having a conversation with my father-in-law, who's an over-the-road truck driver. And he was sharing a story with me about a time he received a traffic violation hauling a load from Arizona to California. And he had to travel back and forth between those two states 3 separate times in an effort to fight that violation and keep his record clean. You see, individuals who hold a commercial driver's license are held to a higher standard behind the wheel than the average ordinary person. And I remember asking him, why don't you just go out and find an attorney? Why do you have to go back and forth? And he said, well, it's a little bit more difficult to find an attorney that handles this type of issue, particularly if I'm not from that area. I'm from Kansas City, and I'm trying to fight a ticket in California. And I remember thinking there had to be a better way than the travel back and forth. And I went into a rabbit hole for about 7 months after taking that data that he gave me. And in those 7 months, I started to circle truck stops on a weekly basis. And I would sit down and talk to the truck drivers that would file in and out of those truck stops about the pain points that they had. What are the things that are affecting you as you're on the road? How does this impact your family? And I started to uncover that there was a larger pain point associated in this group than I initially thought. Once I started to talk to the truck drivers, I started to swim upstream because I said, surely, if the drivers are having this problem, then the companies that they drive for probably have some sort of impact as well. And it was at that point that I found that there was this thing called a CSA score, which is a compliance, safety, and accountability score that all of these trucking companies are judged on. And, if that score gets out of whack, then they can go out of business. And I said, well, there's a larger pain point associated in this particular group than there is in the everyday consumer. So we decided to make the pivot full swing. And that's when TicketRX, in and of itself, was formed in the form that it is today. So with that, there were a couple of key decisions that went on behind the scenes. And if you're anything like me, I remember sitting in these rooms and listening to entrepreneurs who braved the terrain and had an idea to solve a problem, and they just made it seem like magic, right? They had this idea, they launched it, and all of a sudden they get a lot of money, and this is great, right? But I always used to think, how? Like, how does this happen, right? Surely no one just comes up with an idea, launches that idea, and everything is great after that. And so my hope is that, in the next few minutes that I'm here before we take questions, that I can share a little bit with you about the process that went on behind the scenes and some of the mental disciplines that it took to take an idea from a napkin to getting acquired by a Fortune 100 company. So the first thing that I had to do was believe in myself, right? Not only believe in yourself, but have an unwavering belief in yourself and make a commitment. When I made the decision in 2015 to take the idea off the shelf, I gave myself a 5-year window. I said, in 5 years, I will either crash and burn this idea or make it successful, one or the other, right? But I'm giving myself 5 years to exhaust this idea before I move on to the next business venture. Once I made that decision, I didn't know where the pieces would come from, who I needed to connect with, what my network should look like, what mentors I should have. All I did was make a decision, right? And to put that in context, we made that decision in 2015, formed the company in 2016, and we were acquired in 2019. From making the decision, the next step was to build a team, right? And so I was launching a business that was for all intents and purposes, a legal technology company. I don't have a background in law, and I'm not a coder, right? So there was a gap there. And in starting a business, it's important to identify what gaps you have, right? The business owner does not need to be all things to all people, right? As a matter of fact, you shouldn't. But what you should have is enough competence and discipline to put people in the right places where you lack, right? So my co-founder was an attorney, and I put together a pretty decent team as it relates to developing the technology out. That was very important, right? Because once we started to prove this model and prove that it worked, I could focus on what I was really good at, which was going out, creating traction, making sales, securing accounts. All too often what I found among my peers were, we had business ideas with great products and great concepts, and we would spend so much time, focusing on making the perfect product, so much time focusing on making the perfect service without taking a small piece of time to go out to the customer and say, hey, is this something that you want? Would you buy this, right? Would you use this? Not only asking that question, but being open to receive constructive criticism. I think sometimes we can confuse constructive criticism with negativity, right? And there's a huge difference. I'm a person that believes you should block out negativity at all costs, right? You need to run away like the plague, right? But constructive criticism is significantly different. Constructive criticism is what allowed me to focus on the professional truck driver market as opposed to staying the path that I initially thought I should have, right? And so what it took from that dynamic was to go out, create traction. And from that standpoint, we secured accounts with the likes of Lockton, Farmers Insurance, a couple of third-party logistics providers here in Kansas City, and that was before our product was even completely built. What that did from that dynamic was that made us a lot more attractive because now we have all of these major corporations that are super interested in what we're doing, and you can leverage that to have conversations to either go out and acquire additional funds or use that revenue that you're receiving from your customers to continue to build your business. So how did TicketRX get acquired? My initial goal, when I pivoted, I knew that there were some major corporations that were in this space that had existed for at least 30 years. And I knew it would be pretty tough to go head-to-head with some of those individuals who had a significant amount of market share. Our top competitor was in Oklahoma City. Our top two competitors were in Oklahoma City. And I remember sending a cold email to the CEO of one of those companies. And my thought was, I will create a licensing agreement with this particular company. We'll run everything behind the scenes, and we'll completely white label our solution. All I wanted them to give me was a nominal fee that was a per user per month transaction. And I said, you know what, if you give us, I think at that time it was like 50 cents per user per month, we'll handle all of the technology on the back end, behind the scenes. You can white label our platform. It will look like yours to the public, and we'll handle all of the transactions behind the scenes. And I put together one of the largest proposals that I've ever put together for that particular company, and they went silent, right? And I'm like, oh God, what's going on here? At this time, I was still working my full-time job while working on TicketRX part-time. And I knew that, just from my sales experience, it was necessary to start to rustle the bushes a little bit, right? How do I start to create traction, create a fear of loss, create some sort of response from an individual that I just put a multi-million-dollar proposal in front of? So I sent them another email. I said, I'm talking to in the subject line, it said, talking to your competitor. And in that subject line, I said, in the body of the email, I said, listen, hadn't heard from you in a couple months. I'm actually entertaining a conversation with a competitor. If you're still interested, love to talk to you. In about an hour, I received an email back from them that said, hey, wait a minute, let's have a conversation. Let's set up a call in 2 weeks. I was like, this is great. This is awesome, right? I'm talking to the number one company in our industry. We have a multi-million-dollar proposal in front of them. This is going to be fantastic, right? Then I said, well, what if they actually ask me questions about the competitor that I'm talking to? And so I became aware that the number 5 company in our industry was located in Kansas City, and they were owned by a fintech company called MSTS. At that point, I had made a pretty decent amount of brand traction in Kansas City, so I knew quite a few people or had access to people who knew people as well. And I remember going on LinkedIn and looking up their leadership team, and I started with the CEO. And I was like, well, I don't have anybody in common with him. Then I went to the CFO, didn't have anybody in common with him either. So I was like, I'm going to strike out here, right? I was able to find the senior vice president of commercial accounts, and lo and behold, we had something like 197 connections in common. I was like, jackpot. So I reached out because I made a commitment to someone else who's upstairs that I would tell the true version of the story. I reached out to a contact that I had and asked for an introduction. I said, hey, person, insert name here, would you mind introducing me to this individual? I have a couple of questions about a business that they own. Would you be open to facilitating an introduction? She said, sure, absolutely. In about a day, I received an email that I was copied on, and she said, hey, I would like to introduce you to Bryan Shannon. He's the founder of TicketRX. He has some questions. He's doing some market research, yada, yada, yada. She responded immediately because they had a very good connection as well. And she said, sure, absolutely, right? I'd love to sit down and talk with you. So we scheduled coffee about a week before I was supposed to meet with the number one competitor. And so I did all of my diligence on this particular company. I knew they were the number 5 company in the space. I knew they were owned by a Fortune 100 company. I knew roughly how many customers they had, where they operated, the ins and outs of their business. One of the most important things that I knew from the conversations that I had with the previous competitor was that my company was able to do in a matter of seconds what took the number one company in this industry at least 72 hours to accomplish from end to end. So I knew if they were number 5, they had to be significantly lower on that list. So I developed all the intel, went into the conversation, and played dumb, right? She said, hey, Lisa introduced us, tell me a little bit about your business. So I started telling her about my business. Hey, TicketRX, we're a digital platform that streamlines the resolution of traffic infractions and compliance-related issues for over-the-road truck drivers. She said, really? I said, yeah, not sure if you'd be interested in something like that or you would have some insight, but I know you're pretty connected in the community. She says, well, my company actually owns a product that's very similar. Do you know anything about that? I said, tell me more. I'd love to hear more about it, right? So she says, yeah, we own this product. It's been around for 30 years. We have 15,000 customers on the platform. We operate in the United States and Canada, yada, yada, yada. I was like, well, that's very interesting. I had no idea. None. She says, you know what? I think we may have something here. I said, well, that's great. I'd love to hear more about it. To be very transparent with you, I am entertaining conversations with a competitor next week. So I would love, if we're going to have any conversation, I would love to expedite it if at all possible. No problem is what she said. That same day, I received an email from her with her entire executive team copied on it. And the email, they requested a meeting face-to-face. And I was like, holy smokes, all right, so this is great. I have this meeting with the local company on Tuesday, and then I have to be in Oklahoma City to meet with the number one company on Wednesday. And so I go into this meeting, and the entire executive team is there, and she pitches my idea to the team, and I kind of fill in the gaps there. Again, at this point, the only thing I'm looking for is a licensing deal. I just want to license my technology to a major company and operate behind the scenes, right? And so one of the questions they asked me was, Bryan, what is it that you want? I said, you know what, I think it'd be cool if we created a licensing deal. You can use my technology, white label it. We take care of everything behind the scenes. We charge you a nominal fee. And so they said, we can do that, but we think there's something more here. Have you ever thought about selling your company? I was like, not really. Not at that time, I was like, no, I haven't, not really. But remember, I have a timeline in my mind as well, too. I gave myself 5 years to either make this company successful or crash and burn it. And every chance or every opportunity I took to try and crash and burn this idea, someone just kept saying, oh, that's a great idea, Bryan. I was like, all right, this isn't going to work. Then I get a letter of intent from Lockton. I was like, oh, well, God, this isn't going to work. Then Farmer says, hey, can we do a pilot with you, right? And so you realize it's something viable and there's something there. And I said, well, maybe we can grow this a little bit more. I'm not looking to sell my company right now. I'm looking to get a licensing deal. So he says, tell me about the competitor that you're meeting with tomorrow. I was like, well, I guess you guys talk, right? Number one company in the industry, they're about 10x the size you guys are. I'm approaching them with the same dynamic, et cetera. And they said, Bryan, I'm going to be honest with you, everything's on the table at this point. We've seen what your technology does. We like you. You solve a real pain point that we have as it relates to this business. In order for us to do everything from end to end, it took them 5 days to accomplish that, right? Again, number one company, it took 72 hours. Number 5 or 6 company at that time, it took 5 days to accomplish from end to end. And so, I said, well, why don't you guys put together what you think this should look like, right? I really wasn't prepared to have that conversation. I'm just going to be upfront with you, right? Why don't you put together, and give me an idea of what you think this looks like, and we can reconvene on this next week. And so I remember leaving that meeting and talking to my co-founder and one of the business advisors I had at that time. They were like, how did it go, right? My co-founder is a lawyer, and there was no way I wouldn't let him come into the not the negotiation, but the business meetings, because everything was a nail that needed to be hammered, and we weren't in compliance for doing this, and we had to, the comma was wrong on the contract, and et cetera, right? But he would meet me outside, and he'd say, hey, how did everything go? And I was like, dude, they offered to buy the company, He's like, well, what did you say? I was like, I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say, right? Let's go have this meeting tomorrow and see what they say. So we jump into a car and actually drive down to Oklahoma City. And the entire time I'm playing in my mind how this conversation is going to go when I meet with the team down in OKC. And so we had sent them the proposal already, right? Again, the idea is to white label the technology. I know they're significantly larger than the previous company. And so we get into the room, and I'm asked a similar question. So, Bryan, what is it that you want? I was like, have you guys ever thought about acquiring a company like us, just to test the water? I didn't have anything to lose. They're like, well, that's actually how we grow our business. We grow through acquisitions. And if you didn't bring this to the table, this was something that we were going to actually ask you about. I was like, holy smokes, right? Here we go. And so, we start to talk through hypothetically what this would look like if they were to acquire the company. And the goals for each business was significantly different. The impression that we received was one company really just wanted to break us apart, put us on the shelf, cut us a check, break us apart, and put us on the shelf and not deal with it. One company was a little bit more strategic in their approach. So we took that conversation. I said, put together what you think this should look like, send it to me, give me a week, and I'll have a response for you. And so in a 2-week period of time, after having these conversations, I had to play ping pong, right? Because I had to delay one side in order to get another side to the table, right? Then I would delay this side to get a better offer from the other table, right? And so there was this whole back and forth that was taking place. In addition to this, at that point, we had individuals at the table that said, Bryan, look, if you want to say screw both of them and actually get after it, we're ready to invest, right? So we have private money that's ready to invest in us, and two potential acquisition offers. I said, something's going to go here, right? And so at that point, I quit my job, right? I was like, I've done this before, I've been here before, you can always get a job, right? I quit my job, right? I said, in an effort to give this its full attention and take this as far as it can possibly go, it requires my full energy, attention, and effort. And so I quit it was like May of 2018, and then we started down the hill. One thing that you should absolutely never cut corners on is good legal counsel. And when we were going through this process, I made sure that our legal counsel was definitely intact. Good legal counsel can also give you a heart attack, right? Which I almost received because this deal almost fell apart 3 different times. By the time we got far enough down the path, I burned the bridge with the number one company because I didn't like their offer, right? And I had committed to the number 5 company. And so we had a fierce negotiation for about the last 60 to 90 days of the year. And I remember my lawyer telling me, Bryan, we're going to walk away from this. And this was after I had just received a proposal from them. I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea, right? I actually like the proposal that I see. He says, trust me, we're walking away. I said, well, I don't think this is a good idea. Trust me, it's okay, right? Let's figure out a way to make this work. He said, Bryan, you pay me to do these things. I've been doing this for a while. I have your best interests at heart. We're going to tell them we're walking away. And it was a Friday when we had that conversation. And I remember sitting in my chair, looking at my phone as that email went across my screen from Phil to the company. And in the subject line of that email, it said, my client is undervalued. And in the email, he said, we're walking away. I'm going to summarize it. We're walking away because I don't feel you value my client, what we're bringing to the table. We think that you can do better on your offer. And so for that, thank you for your time, but, we're going elsewhere. And I don't think I moved from that chair from Friday to Monday, right? I had a hoodie on. I just pulled it up, and I'm pretty sure I went through a depression at that time, right, for an entire weekend. I was like, I'm screwed, right? I quit my job. I burnt those bridges. I burnt the bridge with the number one company. My lawyer just burnt the bridge that I didn't want to burn, right? This is awful. Like, entrepreneurship sucks, right? And then I received an email that Tuesday from the company. And they said, we've considered your offer and we're prepared to make a counter. And I was like, holy smokes, right? And between that process, the back and forth, we were able to officially ink the deal on January 2nd, one day after the year officially got underway. And as a part of that deal, I also agreed to come in as the managing director of the newly formed business to drive the operation forward. And so it's been fun since then. Last year, the business that we took over and merging 2 businesses together is not an easy feat at all by any stretch of the imagination. You essentially are having to break apart 30-year-old process, 30-year-old technology, embedded, processes that you don't want in place. Maybe the right people aren't in the right places. There's a bunch of things that you have to completely clean up, break apart, and put it back together the way that it needs to be done. And even despite all of those things, the business unit had a top-line sales growth of roughly 64% last year, and that's on a business that had been flat for the past 10 years, which was pretty fantastic. And so, I know we're running low on time, and I want to leave time for questions. But one of the things that I really want to make sure that we drive home is all of that entire process started with a decision being made, right? And if you have an idea or if you have something that you want to do, you have to commit to it. That doesn't mean you have to jump out the boat and quit your job. I'm not saying that at all, because I do believe fundamentally you can work on your dreams while dealing with your reality. And if your reality is I'm a college student, or I'm working a full-time job, or whatever the case may be, you can deal with that reality while you're still working on your dream. But just start with a decision and commit. If it crashes and burns, you have a huge amount of insight and knowledge that you didn't have beforehand, and that makes you significantly stronger in the next business venture that you attack. Because my first business venture did crash and burn in 2007. I'll open up for any questions.
All right, if you have a question, raise your hand, and I can toss this to you. Bryan, would you like to toss one?
Sure. Yeah,
You can throw them.
I like throwing stuff at people.
There you go. Just raise your hand if you have a question.
That one in the back over there.
Oh.
You gonna catch it if I throw it? Good job.
Okay. What is that? Hi. How did you manage your time? Because I know that you said you had a family, you had another job, and you were also doing this.
Yep, that's a really good question. How did I manage my time? I had to commit to a schedule, right? One of the things that I had to understand were there were sacrifices that had to be made. In the grand scheme of things, that is probably one of the things that I could have done a lot better. The business really consumed a lot of me, from that aspect. And so there were things that did have to suffer. There were dance recitals that I couldn't make it to for my daughter, or, basketball games that I couldn't make it to for my son. So I make them come and sit and listen to me now, right? But part of it was understanding what was negotiable and what was non-negotiable. There were certain things that just weren't negotiable for me, and then there were others that I was willing to give on. So maybe it took me giving up a weekend to better myself or increase the gap in knowledge that I had at that point when I was getting my business off the ground. And so it's really just understanding, what you're willing to give versus, what you're not. I don't know if that answered your question. Awesome.
Up here.
Hello, I know I came in late. My name is Deja McGee. I'm a criminal justice major, entrepreneur, motivational speaker.
Pleasure.
So I was wondering, how did you find your purpose and passion when you hit those dark moments?
How did I find my purpose and passion when I hit those dark moments? The biggest thing for me, right, one of the reasons I said you learn as much from a failure as you do from a success. The first business that I started, which ultimately failed in the height of the financial crisis, really put a sore spot in me, right? There was a point where I literally lost everything. I was the person that quit my job at that point, jumped out the boat, and committed to it without understanding market conditions and things that were going on, and we held on for as long as we possibly could. And so there was a level of resilience that was built from that dark moment. With my next business with TicketRX, there were a ton of dark moments, but it was the decision and commitment that I made, and one of the things that I really held steadfast to. So this is even one of my principles even today. It's like if I committed to do this, and I put all of this energy and effort into doing this, and I missed my daughter's dance recital, I missed my son's basketball games, and I did all of that just to quit and not give it its full shot, then I'm doing them a disservice and I'm stealing from them, right? And so one of the things that I had to really focus on was making sure that my belief and passion was bigger than those moments. And that could have been one or two things. Again, my goal was to crash and burn the idea or to make it successful. And so at the end of that road, whatever that road had at the end of it, I was willing to face it. But I knew that if I made that commitment and I made that decision, and I already started making those, burning those bridges with people that I love, I had to go full steam ahead. I don't have anything to throw at you, so we'll just pretend.
Here, I got it right here.
Not asking you to get into specific numbers, but can you talk about if the money that the buyout dollars that you received were in your mind a proper value for the company pre-money or post-money? And then also, what was the approximate multiple in terms of the sales you had with respect to the buyout you got?
I would answer that question if I didn't have people who report to me in the room.
Fair enough.
So if you catch me afterwards, I'll have a conversation with you.
Anybody else?
I've got one, unless there's some other students. A lot of our students, including ones in this room, don't necessarily have a technical background, but they might have an idea for a technical product or a technical business that they want to start. So could you dig in a little bit more into what, for you, as a non-technical founder, it looked like to start a company based on a technical product? Any idea or any strategies that you developed for managing your development team, things like that?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, Brian. I think starting a tech business as a non-technical founder can actually be a huge advantage to you, right? What you find in some capacities are, technical founders really subscribe to one technology or a couple sets of technology, right? And so the path that they're going down, and in some cases, may not necessarily be the right path or the correct path. And so for me, it was always understanding what the vision looked like. While I didn't build TicketRX by coding or doing any of the other technical components to it, the way that the platform operates and communicates with the end users from end to end, how the colors look, what it's supposed to do, the experience that I wanted it to have, the experience that I wanted the users to have, how it interfaced with one another, all came from my brain, right? It's no different than an analogy I give from that capacity is if you have a house and you know what you want your house to look like. You know how many bathrooms you want to be in it, what the room should look like, what the flooring should look like, if you want a pool in the back, et cetera. You don't necessarily have to be the individual who has the skill set to build that house, right? But you can manage that process through. And so anytime you come into the foundation or the framework of said house, if something's off, right? This isn't how I envisioned it. So this isn't working the way that it was supposed to work. The user experience is supposed to be this, not that, right? I wanted the users to, I wanted attorneys to communicate with the end users within a 2-hour time frame. And so the initial platform that was developed had like a 24-hour turnaround, right? And I was like, that's not good enough. What I said that I wanted was this, and the reason that we're having it this way is because of the experience. And so sometimes what will happen is, and what I saw is you'll have technical founders not technical founders, but technical people that will say, well, it's going to be great if the technology does this, or it's going to be awesome if you can push a button and then Zordon, like on the Power Rangers, appears, in front of you, right? Like nobody cares about that. That's not what we're setting out to do. That's not the vision that I had in my mind, right? The vision that I had in my mind is this, and this is what we need to build. And so I'm a fan of individuals who have an idea and maybe they're discouraged because they aren't technical, or the worst thing, I'll give you a quick story. One of the worst decisions I ever made was in this process. I got frustrated with one of my previous developers and tried to learn the code myself, right? That worked for like half a week, and I said, no, this is not it, right? But what we did was made sure we had the right people in the right places to execute, and really held their feet to the fire from that.
Any other questions? Oh.
So kind of piggybacking off that question, how did you, maybe I might have missed this, but how did you go about like finding developers, or did you find it off LinkedIn, or did you go through like a company that already had an established team of developers, or how did you go throughout the process?
Yeah, good question. More valuable, and I completely agree with this. More valuable than the multiple I received on the acquisition, the amount I'm paid now, the amount I made off of the transaction, is the network that I've built up, right? And so one of the biggest investments that you as an entrepreneur, anyone can make in themselves is building their network up, right? Exploring and finding people who are competent in areas that you aren't necessarily competent in. The first developer that I actually found through eScholars, and it was through someone who was in my class. She had a guy that she worked with who had a development company offshores, right? He was the lead developer for Teva Pharmaceuticals for like 15 years. And it was because of a chance conversation that I had with her while sitting in the back of an eScholars class, unraveling the gaps that I had at that point, because, you know, all it was an idea. I said, and I was open enough to say, hey, you know, do you think he would be open to having a conversation with me? And so from that conversation, it was, hey, here's what I would like the business to do. You know, this is what I think the technology should do. And he was able to fill the gaps in from there. And then from there, the next set of developers that I used was through networking as well. So, you know, I'm always a fan of, you know, who else or who do you know? You know, here's what I'm working on. You know, who do you think I should be talking to from that capacity?
We've got time for one more question, if there are any. Adele, I think, and also Mark.
Oh, Mark has a question as well. No, I was just... It was his class where they discovered I had 51 speeding tickets.
Hey, Bryan.
Hey, Adele.
Hey, so I had a question for you. So, to my understanding, so you got it developed, but did you have it in the marketplace at all?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question.
Right.
So part of the issue that we had, I touched on this a little bit during the talk, was integrating the technology that we developed as a startup with the technology of an existing Fortune 100 company, right? And so what initially was thought to be an easy migration and an easy integration of both platforms turned out to be a lot more tedious than we anticipated. And so what happened from that capacity is we've phased out our launches. And so the first version of the platform, of the new ORDP platform, launches next week. And then we have subsequent launches through November 2020.
So with that, you were able to basically sell your idea. Is that the case? Because that's what I wanted to understand. Like, you know, I think a lot of people are like, wow, you know, how do you go and bring something to market? Or you don't even have to necessarily bring something to market. You can actually have kind of an idea kind of pieced together, have something, you know, starting to go as far as being built. But you were able to sell that, you know, this is so valuable that you need this regardless. Is that the case, or how did that work out? Sorry.
No, not necessarily. So it was yes and no, right? There was a version of the platform that was already built. There was a version of the technology that was already built. The additional bells and whistles and things that we wanted to embed into the technology, the Zordon face that we talked about, you know, those things didn't exist, right? And so the thought behind that was, and part of my value proposition to both companies was, look, in my hands, this company generates X, right? In your hands, with your existing customer base currently, this company would generate Y. If you were to lock in and make another investment into upgrading this platform to do these other things based off of the research that we've done, you would put this multiple on top of that as well. And so it's understanding what you have currently and what future state looks like as well.
All right, we're just about out of time. I want to wrap it up by asking you, in your talk you mentioned you are a serial ideas guy. So it's kind of knowing you and reading between the lines and just knowing that entrepreneurs want to solve problems. As soon as you get this problem solved of integrating your product with your acquiring company's product, give us a preview of what's on your mind next.
So, no, that's a good question, and that's a question that comes up a lot. One of the things I talked about early on was knowing what you want and starting with the end in mind. And for me, you know, the end in mind always looked like getting to the other side of the table to invest in other entrepreneurs and other business ideas and help other entrepreneurs realize the dreams that they have as well. So for me, depending on where the next path leads, because I do get the itch from time to time, right? But I do think that can be scratched also by helping other entrepreneurs realize their dreams as well, and a lot less stress and heartache.
Thank you very much, Bryan. Let's thank Bryan again for coming out and speaking with us. We have pizza and refreshments out in the atrium, so come on out, help yourselves, introduce yourself to Bryan. Also come back for our next First Wednesday, which is April 1st. We'll have Dr. Michael Ray speaking about RX saving solutions. Great.